This is Professor Michael Chapman. I'm one of the most experienced IVF doctors in Australia. I believe that an important part that I can contribute is to educate patients in relation to fertility, infertility, and all that involves. These series of podcasts help to educate you. I hope they are helpful to you. If you wish to know more, however, I'm more than happy to have you contact me via email, which is profmchapman@gmail.com, or make an appointment to see me on 9138 4222.
Last question to take us through to the end. How close are we to using artificial wombs or lab-grown gametes in mainstream fertility clinics?
Oh, miles away. We're years away from that, partly because even if you hit on the right answer tomorrow, to get through the regulatory authorities and the proof that it works with proper studies takes a decade or more. Just recently, a group in America, in Oregon, have been able to take a skin cell, and by manipulating the environment and manipulating the genetic makeup, have been able to create an egg that would fertilize, that was equivalent to a human egg. It came from a human skin cell, and they ended up with an appropriate 23 chromosomed, rather than a 46 chromosome, which is a normal cell, which they fertilized. But every embryo they tested was genetically abnormal. So, sounds like a step forward. It was published in Nature about a month ago. It's a step forward, but we're not there by any means. So I don't see anything significant happening in the next decade.
One more question, Prof.
Yeah.
How do you decide when pre-genetic testing or pre-genetic screening is warranted and when it's not?
I presume you're talking about pre-implantation genetic testing. Yeah. So that's looking at an embryo, when an embryo gets to the 5-day mark, when it's got 300 or 400 cells, and we take 10 cells away and send them off to the laboratory to test. And what that test comes back, it says that those cells are normal, or they have abnormalities in the numbers of chromosomes that are present. If we find abnormality, significant numbers of cells have an aberration in the number of chromosomes, we call it aneuploid, and we throw it out. If it's euploid, in other words, all of the cells have the right number, the 46 XY chromosomes, then that's a euploid embryo. There's also a group in between. Nothing's black and white, unfortunately. But when is it useful? People vary a lot in their approach to this. Putting back an embryo which we know is genetically normal increases the chances of success of that embryo to something in the order of 60%, compared with what I've previously talked about, around 35 to 40%. So it's a significant jump in success. So doing it means that you find the embryo that's best likely to produce a pregnancy earlier. On the other hand, if you've got 3 embryos, and you don't test them, you're going to put them all back eventually anyway, one at a time, and you'll find the one that's genetically normal. And genetic testing, it costs money. In our clinic, $650 per embryo. Most clinics are more expensive than that. So there's an expense associated with it. And there's a 2 or 3% chance of losing an embryo that was actually normal, because the biopsy technique, the freezing and the thawing of the embryo, can have an impact on its survival. So it's not for every person. The biggest study suggests that it was potentially useful over the age of 38, because the incidence of aneuploidy in the background of population is much higher as you get towards 40 to 45. Before 35, it's pretty much doubtful whether it has any real benefit, other than if you're someone that produces, you're lucky and you produce 10 blastocysts in a cycle. And if you're 34, half of them are going to be genetically abnormal. You're going to have 5 transfers where it was never going to work. And perhaps honing down onto the right ones is useful when you've got lots and lots of embryos. And in the older patient, knowing when you're putting an embryo back that it's genetically normal is reassuring, both in terms of the possibility of an abnormality, but also if you don't test them and you put them back and it fails, which is highly likely, because if you're at 40, your chances of a blastocyst being genetically abnormal is something like 70%. So when you put embryo back that are untested and you have a miscarriage or you don't implant, you don't really know why. In older patients or those over 40, I have to say I increasingly are doing genetic testing so we know where we are. Because if it's abnormal, you're not going to have it put back. You don't have the 2-week horrible wait and the downer of a failed cycle. So the main ones that we suggest it for is women over 40, women with lots and lots of embryos. And there's one other group, which is women who had recurrent pregnancy miscarriages. Because if you put back a euploid embryo, because most miscarriages, 60% of miscarriages are related to a genetically abnormal embryo. By getting rid of that 60%, you're reducing your miscarriage rate to barely 2 or 3% compared with the background rate of 15 to 20%. So if you've had multiple miscarriages, doing genetic testing before you put the embryo back can be very helpful.
Prof.
And don't forget that you can access all the previous episodes by going to our website www.theivfjourney.com and select IVF Journey podcast from the navigation menu.